Hello, and welcome back to the No Sleep for Dramas podcast channel. As you can see from the title, this is about Studio Ghibli. A little background on Studio Ghibli. I have always been a fan of Studio Ghibli, and I realized this year that I have not seen all of the movies. I've seen a lot of the more famous ones and the ones that are talked about, but I've never seen all of them. I think there's like 22. So I thought about giving myself a little challenge for 2025, which I don't think I'm going to finish in 2025 at this point. It is April, but I at least want to start it. And what I want to do is I'm going to try and watch all of the Studio Ghibli movies and then give some little mini reviews of them as I go. Like every 4 or 5 movies, I'm going to make a video of my mini reviews. And then once I finish all of them, I'm going to rank them all in terms of my ratings and what I like or dislike about them. That is the plan. And this is my first video of my mini reviews for the Studio Ghibli movies. I watched 5 of the films. I also watched it in chronological order. This is my video of the first 5 Studio Ghibli films and my mini reviews, my rankings of those movies, and what I thought about them. The first movie I'm going to talk about is the movie Only Yesterday, and that is a movie that Studio Ghibli released in 1991. I'm going to read the synopsis that I found online for this because I found that it was harder for me to summarize this than I wanted it to be. It's going to give a little away in terms of the synopsis, but I felt like the summaries that I found, the synopses that I found, could explain the movies better than I can. This is a synopsis that I got off of myanimelist.net, and I'm going to read it directly, which is why I'm going to be looking off camera. Okajima is a 27-year-old independent woman who spent her entire life in Tokyo. Looking to unwind from the rush of the big city, she decides to visit her family in the country to help out during the harvest. On the train there, Taiko vividly recalls her memories as a schoolgirl in the initial stages of puberty, as if she is on a trip with her childhood self. A young farmer named Toshio picks her up at the station, and they quickly develop a friendship. During her stay, Taiko forms strong bonds with family and friends, learning the contrast between urban and rural life, as well as struggles and joys of farming. I got this synopsis off of myanimelist.net if you guys want to go check that out. I also have a blog post of this, so if you are curious about any of the movies that I talk about, you can go to the blog and all the links are there. My review of this is it's a mixed bag for me. And maybe it's because this movie just wasn't for me. I am not the biggest fan of slice of life, and clearly that means I did not like this film because this film is definitely slice of life. I grow bored of them pretty easily because it's just there's not enough that goes on in the movie or the dramas that keep me interested for the most part. This story just moved way too slowly for me, and while I appreciated some of the things that were in it, which I will talk about, I still liked some things in this film. Overall, the story just moved too slowly for me to absolutely enjoy this movie to its fullest. I loved that this movie was about a woman who is reminiscing about her childhood as she goes to the countryside. There was like a lot of nostalgia in the movie for me, and then that caused the audience members to have nostalgia about their own childhood. So for me, I grew up in Wisconsin, so instead of going to the countryside, we went up north to cabins or we went camping, and I found myself thinking about that type of thing while watching this movie and watching this woman reminisce about her own childhood and wanting to go to the countryside. I also found it interesting that the animation of this movie sort of matched that. So if you were watching scenes when she was a child, they were lighter in color, they seemed half done, and then when she was an adult, they were more defined, had more color, darker colors, like somebody who had gone through life and who knew more about themselves. The childhood parts that seemed half finished or whatever, it was about a girl who was trying to figure out what she wanted in life and maybe not have fully made that decision yet. So I loved how that animation kind of reflected the two aspects of her as a child as well as her as an adult. I also liked the seamless transitions from the child to adult scenes. Most of the time she was in the countryside and she had a triggered memory. She would look at something and a memory would trigger, and it would seamlessly transition into that memory, and I thought that was very well done. One of the things that was an interesting topic for me that was brought up in this movie was organic farming. Now, this movie was made in 1991. I doubt that that topic was as knowledgeable as it is today. It was clear that this movie was sort of made to address the topic and kind of teach people about organic farming. It was a is an interesting topic to watch now in 2025 and see how it was discussed back in the 90s. I mean, at one point, you had a full explanation of what the male lead in this movie did as a job and how he got into organic farming. I found that quite interesting coming from somebody living in 2025. The other thing, and the last thing I'll talk about, is that the music stood out in this film. At one point, the male lead picked her up from the train station, and she asked what type of music was playing in his car on the way home, and he said it was a Hungarian band. And I found that really interesting to have a Japanese movie with Hungarian music in it. And then as the film proceeded to use that music as well as other music, I Shazammed some of the music and realized that a song was from Bulgaria. So you had this Japanese movie with Japanese people speaking Japanese while in the Japanese countryside, and the entire background of music for this movie was Eastern European Eastern European music. And I thought that fit the farming aesthetic really well, actually, in my opinion, which is why the music kind of stood out to me even more because it was a unique pick for a movie. Overall, my rating for this movie was a 7 out of 10. The slice of life just wasn't for me, really, and it was too slow. That was a big thing. And I'm not gonna like every single one of these movies, but there you go. That's my review of Only Yesterday. I rated it a 7 out of 10. Second movie I'm going to talk about is Porco Rosso. It was made in 1992. Again, I'm going to read the synopsis. Synopsis: After a curse turned him into a pig, World War I ace Marco Polo becomes Porco Rosso, a mysterious bounty hunter who takes down sky pirates in the Adriatic Sea. He whiles away his days in a secluded island, rarely leaving other than to collect bounties or to visit the beautiful Gina, a songstress and owner of the Hotel Drino. One day, while traveling to fix his faulty engine, Porco Rosso is gunned down by a young American hotshot named Donald Curtis. Thrilled at the possibility of fame, Donald boldly declares the flying pig is dead. Not wanting to disappoint Gina, Porco Rosso flees to the famous Piccolo Spa airplane company and takes out a massive loan to repair his plane. There, he is surprised to find that the chief engineer of Piccolo Spa is the 17-year-old Fio Piccolo, who hungers for a chance to prove herself. With Fio's improvements, Porco Rosso prepares to challenge Donald officially and regain his honor. Again, that's from myanimelist.net. I did not think I would like this film as much as I did. I definitely like this one better than Only Yesterday. Also, I think the synopsis, yes, while it is about him taking down pirates and fighting this American guy, it also addresses some heavier topics such as death and war and survivor's guilt from that war because it does take place in Italy after World War I. For me, which is kind of funny, the pig character, Porco Rosso, kind of reminded me of Perrault, and that's the Belgian detective Perrault, probably because he has a mustache and also he wears a trench coat a lot of the time. That's pretty much my only reasoning, I think. I thought this film stood out in animation style and tone compared to some of the other Studio Ghibli films that I watched. A lot of the Studio Ghibli films I've seen have a lot more fantasy or whimsy to them, especially the more famous ones. And this one, while it did have comedy, had some more of a serious undertone to it, especially with the topics of war and survivor's guilt in the background. Well, I appreciated that because it was a different aspect of a Studio Ghibli movie I didn't anticipate. This film did have comedy to it, but it reminded me of those old, like, Popeye cartoons where you have these band of pirates who are constantly trying to beat Porco and beat up each other. And they just reminded me of those old Popeye cartoons where it was a silly fight with a lot of dust and a lot of punching, and they were just going at each other. For some reason, I was reminded by that cartoon. And maybe it was because one of the characters in this band of pirates looked like the villain from the Popeye cartoon. I don't know. I also found it really interesting to be watching this film in the USA in 2025 because it does criticize fascism in Italy in World War One. And you know how we are dealing with politics in the USA right now. It was very interesting to watch this movie because I did not watch the trailers or anything when I clicked play on these movies. I just dove in because I wanted to be as objective as possible and not have any bias. I knew that this was about a pilot, but I didn't really know much beyond that. So to have a movie criticizing fascism, yeah, I was not anticipating that. This movie also, speaking of criticism, had some great one-liners. I love some of the dialogue on this. I'm going to read one that I loved. Said, "I'd rather be a pig than a fascist." I love that line. I actually rewound it to make sure that I had read that correctly because I was watching it with Japanese audio. I love that line. And it wasn't the only line that stood out to me. I thought that was really well done. Another thing that this had a good topic on was female empowerment. All of the female characters in this movie were fantastic. I loved how Gina stood out because she was this songstress in this restaurant, but it was clear that during the war she had done a lot more. And she was this strong, take no prisoners woman type of persona. And then you had the mechanic who was working in a male dominated field and was trying to prove herself. And I think she did in this movie. Along those lines, too, there was this scene where Porco took his plane to the company to fix it. And they were like, okay, we need to hire all these people. And when they started hiring all these people, they all happened to be women. It was a bunch of women fixing his airplane. And we know, like during the wars, the women had to take up male dominated jobs because they were all off at war. And so it was a very impactful scene to see all these women, old, young, sisters, mothers, building this plane and fixing this plane in what you would obviously see as a male dominated job. I felt like the topic of female empowerment was very forward in this film. One thing I will say, I did not think the movie had the strongest ending. I wanted more with the love story between Porco Rosso and Gina, but I will say the ending also reminded me of Casablanca. It sort of made sense with their love story at the same time. I was just really impressed by this film, and I really didn't think I was going to like it as much as I did. I gave this a 9 out of 10. That was Porco Rosso, 9 out of 10. Next movie I'm going to talk about is Ocean Waves. This was made in 1993. The synopsis is, in the city of Kauchi, the high school student Taku Morisaki is going about his work when his friend Yutaku Musano calls and asks him to get to their school as soon as possible. Taku arrives and Matsuno introduces him to Rikako Muto, a beautiful girl from Tokyo who recently transferred to their school. Although Rikako is academically and athletically gifted, her generally unpleasant attitude leaves her with virtually no friends outside of Matsuno and another girl from her class. After their chance encounter during their class trip, Taku finds himself more involved in Rikako's personal life, much to Matsuno's dismay. Struggling to balance his friendship with Matsuno and his own budding infatuation with Rikako, Taku must come to terms with his feelings and understand how a girl with a troubled past is having such a massive effect on his life. That is from myanimelist.net. For Ocean Waves, this is going to be a shorter review because I did not like this movie. I did not like this movie for one main reason and one main reason only, and that was I did not like the female lead at all. I thought this was just going to be like a slice of life movie, which it was, but I thought the female lead took advantage of the male lead the entire film. And not only did she take advantage of him, she took advantage of a lot of other people in the film and manipulated a lot of the other people in the film. I realized she had a rough life. It was revealed in the film she did have a rough life, but I could not feel sorry for her. She made no progression in the story, or very little progression, in my opinion. There was some scenes where she either slapped the male lead and he slapped her back, and then he also got punched by his best friend and he punched him back. Those slaps and punches made no sense on why they occurred, even though it was really satisfying to watch her get slapped because I did not like her character. There was no communication in this film. When I clicked play on Ocean Waves, I expected a romance. I expected this sweet little short romance that you get in an hour, 15-minute movie. There was no communication, which means the romance didn't happen. I feel like if there was romance and the female wasn't manipulative and actually told the truth, the romance would have happened, but she was just really manipulative. By the end of the film, when the male lead and the female lead confessed to each other that they did like each other, it wasn't believable to me because it made no sense why he liked her in the first place, because she was so horrible to him the entire movie in the flashbacks of what we were watching. I just could not get behind their romance because it made no sense of why these people even liked each other. It was slice of life as well, and as I said, that topic just is not my favorite, and I don't particularly like it. I just couldn't get behind the slice of life. I couldn't get behind how horrible the female lead was. I felt like it dragged, even though it was an hour and 15 minutes long. The animation was old school, which I thought was fitting because he was reminiscing about his high school years and this girl that he liked. The animation being old school was very fitting, but I couldn't get behind this film, and it was a 3 out of 10 for me. I rated Ocean Waves a 3 out of 10 for me. I just could not like the film. The second to last film I'm going to review in this video is called Pom Poko. It was created in 1994. The synopsis I'm going to read off of my anime list is: with the increasing need of Tokyo to expand as one of Japan's major cities, edible sacrifices must be made so that changes can take place. One of these sacrifices is the room for nature and wildlife to flourish. It will decrease significantly over time. As the decline continues, many animal communities experience the brunt of urbanization. One such community, known as the tanuki, a type of magical shape-shifting mammal, is caught up in a struggle to defend their beloved forest from being absorbed by the looming threat of expanding Tokyo. As more and more tanuki find themselves with nowhere to hide and territorial fights become increasingly regular amongst the different factions, the elder tanuki decide that something must be done. For the sake of their home as well as safety of their future generations, the tanuki unite as one with the hope that together they might be able to repel mankind's construction projects and scare them away from the forests using their shape-shifting abilities. But as they begin their first attempts at sabotage, the tanuki soon realize the operation will be no easy task. Will they reclaim their forest from a united community, or will they be torn apart by war against humanity, blinded by anger and pain after witnessing nature's destruction? So that was the synopsis from myanimelist.net as I read. For my mini review, this is another movie I expected to be a cute movie. I mean, when I see animated animals, I figured it was going to be cute, but it ended up having a much deeper message and had a lot more emotion to it, which I did like. It had a much darker message to it because it had an environmental message. It was about saving nature and saving these animals' homes from the expanding city of Tokyo. And I wasn't anticipating that much darker message. The message of this movie, as I said, was an environmental one. It criticized humans destroying land and forests to build cities and kicking the animals out of those territories. This movie is based off an actual Tokyo suburb being built around the time that it was made. I found that to be an interesting fact. The animals in this film, I assumed were just raccoons, but from further research, they were actually tanuki, which is a magical shape-shifting mammal. The tanuki is an actual real animal in Japan, but it also has some folklore and mythology behind it. The mythical beings can shapeshift into anything as well as humans. One part of the film I didn't like, I didn't think it was needed, but I also watched this without doing research, and then I researched it later, so I understand why it was there in hindsight. Was in multiple scenes in the film, the tanuki transformed their genitalia, and only their genitalia. And they referenced it. They were like, yeah, that's my genitalia, in like the dialogue. For example, one of the scenes they were training to sabotage the humans, and they were learning about the humans, and at one point they were all sitting on what you thought was a rug. In reality, it was one of the tanuki's genitalia transformed into a rug. Obviously, after my research, I realized that there was a reason for this. Apparently, the tanuki was also associated with fertility and good luck. When you are going around Japan and you see statues of tanuki, sometimes they do have large genitalia because they sometimes are associated with fertility. With this new information, it makes sense why these scenes were in the movie, but I still found it really strange while I was watching it, and I just didn't think these scenes were necessary in all honesty. But I understand why they were there. I mean, it's part of the folklore. It's part of history with these magical tanuki. So I understand why it was there. I did also like the fact that I got to research about this movie because I do like researching about mythology and folklore. I thought the animation style was classic Ghibli and suited the film quite well, and I did love the more somber tone of the film. I thought that fit with the environmental message, and these tanuki really had a dilemma and had to make decisions that was heartbreaking. Overall, I still love this movie, and it was unexpected that I liked this movie a lot. My rating is a 9 out of 10 for Pom Poko. The last movie that I watched and the last movie that I'll review in this video is Whispers of the Heart. It was made in 1995. The synopsis is Shizuku Tsukishima, sorry if I mispronounce any of these names, I'm horrible at pronouncing Japanese names, is an energetic 14-year-old girl who enjoys reading and writing poetry in her free time. Glancing at the checkout cards of her books one evening, she notices her library books are frequently checked out by a boy named Seiji Amasawa. Curiosity strikes Shizuku, and she decides to search for the boy, who shares her love of literature. Meeting a peculiar cat on the train, Shizuku follows the animal and is eventually led to a quaint antique shop, where she learns about a cat statuette known as the Baron. Taking an interest in the shop, she surprisingly finds Seiji, and the two quickly befriend one another. Shizuku learns about acquainting herself with Seiji, and he has a dream that he would like to fulfill, causing her dismay as she remains uncertain of her future and has yet to recognize her talents. However, her relationship with Seiji grows. Shizuku becomes determined to work towards a goal. Guided by the whispers of her heart and inspiration from the Baron, she resolves to carve out her own potential and dreams. And again, that synopsis is from myanimelist.net. This is another movie that I thought I would not like because it's slice of life, but I actually really, really enjoyed this. The coming of age story was more for me, and also it was a slice of life, which, as I said, is not my favorite, but due to the girl's imagination, it added a little more whimsy and magical elements to this film, which I love about Studio Ghibli films. When it has magical element to it, it probably is some of my favorite films. It was a story of young love, and it was portrayed like that. It seems like this film had touches of magic with the story, but it wasn't a full fantasy story. It was a slice of life mixed with a little whimsy, a little fantasy here and there. The girl was dealing with her first crush, but also navigating some serious decisions, at least to her, they were serious decisions. And I loved her imagination. She was a writer, she was a poet, and she would imagine some of her stories, and you'd actually watch those stories from her imagination play out. And that was where the fantasy and the whimsy came from. I love the animation of this because while this movie was colorful, the scenes with her imagination playing out added more color and added more whimsy to it. I thought that was a really nice contrast to some of the other films I had watched in this review. The views of Tokyo also from the male lead's house was beautiful. They were animated gorgeously. I also thought the lead couple had some great chemistry. They pushed each other to strive for what they wanted. They supported each other. They admired each other for their passions and what they wanted to do. And even though it was young love, they were only both like 14, 15 years old. I thought they had a very mature relationship, which I can't relate to obviously a 14-year-old romance, but because it was mature and they did have some mature discussions, I related more to that part, and I appreciated that film for this. It was just really nice and really low-key, low-stakes romance. Fun to watch play out. I loved also the themes of this film. It had the themes of creativity, it had themes of growth, self-discovery, independence. It was about a girl who was trying to find herself and what she wanted to do in life. I really appreciated all this stuff about this film. The music was an interesting choice. The opening song I recognized, and then I had to Google it, and it was Take Me Home, Country Roads, performed by Olivia Newton-John. I was not expecting that. I don't know why. I don't know what I was expecting. I was not expecting that. I don't know if I liked this musical choice. It wasn't bad, but I guess it just didn't make sense for me. Also, the ending was a little rushed. We got a confession and everything. I actually kind of laughed at the confession because it was a little abrupt. And I was like, you guys are only 14 years old and you have this type of confession. I laughed, but it was also cute. But the ending did seem a little rushed to me. Overall, though, I love this film. I liked it a lot more than I thought I would, and so my rating for Whispers of the Heart was a 9 out of 10. Overall, just to go over my rankings, I'm going to read them to you. We have Only Yesterday, which I gave a 7 out of 10. We have Porco Rosso, which I gave a 9 out of 10. Ocean Waves, which I gave a 3 out of 10. Pom Poko, which I gave a 9 out of 10. And then Whispers of the Heart is also a 9 out of 10. And that is the first 5 films that I watched of the Studio Ghibli and my first 5 mini reviews. I hope you liked this video. If you have seen any of these films, let me know what you think of them, what you thought of my mini reviews, what you thought of my rankings. I do plan to do more of these videos. It's my little challenge to myself. Let me know what you thought of this video and what you thought of my thoughts and my rankings and my ratings. And eventually, when I watch all of the movies, I plan on ranking them all and doing that as a video as well. Thank you for watching this video, and let me know what you thought about Studio Ghibli. I would like to know in the comments.